Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, thoughts from Wolves Blazers on Saturday, because as it turns out, they play the Blazers again tonight. We'll also talk to Mike Richmond of Locked On Blazers for his thoughts on the matchup, what the Blazers could potentially do differently on Monday, what the Wolves might need to do to beat Portland. We'll also look at the week ahead. It's all upcoming here on the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. Happy Monday, everybody. Hopefully you had a fantastic weekend and happy game day. The Wolves are in Portland, still in Portland, and take on the Blazers for the second time in 3 days on Monday night. We'll talk all about that. We have Mike Richmond from Locked On Blazers here in just a little bit, so stay tuned for some great thoughts from the Portland side. Much more here today on the show as well. First of all, though, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Locked On Wolves is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms, from Apple to Google to Spotify to Odyssey. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch the show on Locked On Sports Minnesota. That's the Roku and Amazon Fire TV app. More great local sports coverage 24/7. It's absolutely free. Download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app today on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can also, of course, follow the show on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves or at Beecken. And that's with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. All right, let's talk with some quick thoughts about Portland on Saturday. So, did the live postcast with Marty Gellner following the show, so hopefully you listen to that. If not, it's the audio track before this one on all the audio feeds, and the video on YouTube is over at Locked On Sports Minnesota. But I want to hit a couple of high points from Saturday. So basically, Marty and I talked about how, like, hey, moral victories are a tough thing right now, right? Because this is a 500 team that mortgaged basically its future to get Rudy Gobert. Well, not basically, mortgaged their future to get Rudy Gobert. And now Karl-Anthony Towns is hurt. And, you know, there has to be something beyond silver linings and moral victories, right? We've done this for years with the Wolves, and there's a time and a place for those. At the same time, the Wolves are missing Karl-Anthony Towns, their best all-around player, their most consistent all-around player. And they are still trying to integrate another top 25 NBA player to their roster, and they're not even a third of the way through the season. So, of course, there's going to be some growing pains. Also, they played a good team, and now 2 games above 500 team, a team with the same record as them coming into the game on Saturday on the road on the second night of a back-to-back for Minnesota. So there's plenty of reasons, and I wouldn't call them excuses, plenty of reasons why the Wolves maybe shouldn't have won on Saturday, right? I think both things can be true. I think we can have a reasoned conversation of like, hey, this team should, this is a game that they easily could have won. They did some things well. This is a team they could beat. They weren't playing, it wasn't Memphis. It wasn't Boston. It wasn't one of the league's best teams on the road. It wasn't Golden State, right? This was a winnable game. But sometimes you just lose basketball games. And Marty and I came to that, or we covered that pretty extensively on Saturday. That, like, all things considered, the effort was there, which frankly has been one of the bigger issues for the Wolves this year. And I know that shouldn't be the case, but it has been. And they've struggled mightily on the second night of back-to-back. So to see them put forth the requisite effort, play hard throughout, not fall victim to this, like, the way that they've mishandled adversity so much this season, and still compete when Damian Lillard and Anthony Simons are going nuts and combining for more than half of Portland's points, just the two of them. Like, the Wolves were in this game until the final minute. Like, they competed in this game. And I think that can be true without it being like, moral victory, man. I think it's progress. 3 weeks ago, the Wolves probably lose this game by 15, 20 points. They're probably, the effort level probably isn't there. The legs, the stamina probably are not there, especially without Karl-Anthony Towns. Instead, they competed. Look, here's another way to look at it. The Wolves lost the three-point battle. They lost the free throw battle, and they lost the rebounding battle. The rebounding battle, they lost by 17 boards. And yet they were in this game down till the very end. They only lost by 2 possessions, a 6-point loss. Portland scored 9 more points on 3-point attempts, 7 more points on free throws, and had 17 more overall rebounds, 7 more offensive rebounds. The Wolves only had 4 offensive rebounds the entire game. Portland had 22 second chance points. You rattle those stats off, and you'd expect this to be a 5-6 possession loss, 15, 20 points, right? Instead, the Wolves only lost by 6 and were in it until the very end. They scored 118 points. So much of the season, the problem has been the offense, right? So much of the season, the problem has been offensive consistency, shot making in general, which, in this game, like, you'd like to see them shoot more threes, I guess, but they shot, the percentages were all good. They mostly got what they wanted in pick and roll game. They scored 118 points. Offense was not the issue. Portland is not a great defensive team. They're like bottom 5, 6, 7 defensively league wide, but they are a top 10 offense. And the Wolves, somewhat predictably, struggled to slow down the top 10 offense. Portland dropped 124. And like I said a minute ago, Lillard and Simons combined for 67 of Portland's 124 points, so more than half of their points. And the Wolves allowed them to shoot 21 threes between them, but they only made 8 of 21, which is, fine, but not outstanding. The problem was that Lillard had 15 free throw attempts and made all 15 of his free throws, but they made them work for it. They combined for 9 assists, but 7 turnovers, Lillard and Simons. They scored 67 points, but it took them 44 shots to do it, which is, it's certainly efficient. I mean, that's, what, 2 points a shot. So that is efficient overall. But Lillard was only 9 of 2 from the floor. He was only 3 of 11 from 3-point range. Like, there were some, I'll say it, silver linings defensively for the Wolves, but still, what I want, like, next segment here, we'll get into the pick and roll coverage a little bit with Mike Richmond at Lockdown Blazers. And he has some great perspective on, like, hey, how do you slow down Lillard and Simons in pick and roll? Can you actually play drop pick and roll coverage against them, like, which is what the Wolves want to do? And we'll cover this too, but the Wolves eventually ended up just switching everything. And Rudy Gobert was on an island against Lillard too often down the stretch in this game. He did have that one big block at the rim late in the fourth quarter where he trailed Lillard and got the ball right before it hit the glass, got the block. But Mike and I will talk about that here in a minute, because I thought it was really fascinating to get his perspective on somebody who covers the Blazers. But anyway, back to the overall, like, main takeaways from this game. Point of attack defense was generally okay on the ball, but after the ball screen action, the Wolves struggled to be consistent with how they were covering that, whether they were switching things, whether they were dropping. It's just a pick your poison situation, right? You don't want Dame shooting threes. You don't want these guys getting downhill and getting to the rim. You don't want to end up committing a foul, which is what they did, to the tune of 15 free throw attempts for Dame. It's a pick your poison situation. The Wolves are going to have to switch things up a little bit in terms of pick and roll coverage on Monday night. I mentioned rebounding. The Wolves were minus 17 on the glass against a pretty mediocre rebounding team. Nurkic was awesome early on the glass. The Wolves struggled to check him. Pretty much everyone besides Rudy, which is what we're used to, right? Usually it's, it's the other guys that need to step up. It's the McDaniels of the world, which, by the way, Jaden McDaniels had 0 rebounds in 29 minutes in this game, which is completely unacceptable. He's starting at, I guess Kyle Anderson is technically playing power forward now, but with no Karl-Anthony Towns, they need McDaniels all that much more, whether he's technically the 3 or the 4. It doesn't really matter. He's too long, too athletic, too dynamic of a player to have 0 rebounds in 29 minutes. And that's what happened with Jaden. D'Angelo Russell had 1 rebound in 39 minutes. So you have 2 starters who play a combined, 68 minutes and combined for 1 rebound, which is just astonishing. Like, how does that happen? Austin Rivers off the bench. 1 rebound in 21 minutes, 0 of 1 shooting. That's all he did. He turned the ball over once, no points, 0 of 1 shooting. Not much off the bench. Nas was fine. Nas was good, actually. I think good overall. Jalen Noel had a pretty quiet night by his standards. Wendell Moore was inserted into the game to try and guard Lillard. That was a tough assignment. He didn't do anything offensively. This was pretty much the starters without a whole lot from Jaden McDaniels. Jalen Noel not really doing a whole lot, and then Naz Reid playing pretty well off the bench in limited minutes, right? The minutes he played with Rudy were very, very short. I think he played a couple minutes with him total, but mostly was the backup 5 in this game. So, more needed out of the bench, certainly, but the bigger concern is the glass. The biggest concern is the pick and roll defense. Again, the offense for the Wolves pretty much hummed along in this game. I want to talk to Mike Richmond of Lockdown Blazers next, because I think his perspective is super valuable. And he does a great job kind of breaking down what Portland does on both ends of the floor. So we talked about a couple of his thoughts from Saturday's game, what to look forward to on Monday. So we're going to do that here next. First, though, Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at Rocket Money. Are you wasting money on subscriptions? 80% of people have subscriptions they forgot about. Maybe for you, it's an unused Amazon Prime account or Hulu account that never gets streamed. There's a great app that I use that helps me track all my expenses, and because of it, I no longer waste money on subscriptions that I don't even use. You might have heard of it. It's called Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill, longtime friends of the program. The app shows all your subscriptions in one place and cancels what you don't want for you. Rocket Money can even find subscriptions that you didn't even know you were paying for. You may even find out that you've been double charged for a subscription. To cancel a subscription, all you have to do is press cancel, and Rocket Money takes care of the rest. Get rid of useless subscriptions with Rocket Money now. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Seriously, it could save you hundreds per year. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, as promised, I have Mike Richmond from Locked On Blazers here on the show. And of course, on the heels of the Wolves' loss to the Blazers Saturday, going into Monday's game, it's difficult to win 2 in a row in these kind of mini series. These, well, it's not even home and home. They're both in Portland. But I mean, the Blazers put the Wolves away late. A lot of, the backcourt for Portland dominated the things late in the game on Saturday. So, Mike, as we go into Monday's game, I mean, did that go about as expected? Is that how you thought Portland would get their win on Saturday? Was it going to be a lot of Dame, a lot of Simons? What were your thoughts coming out of that one?
Yeah, I mean, the Blazers have been over the last 10 games one of the worst defensive teams in the league. If they win because they score. And typically since Damian Lillard, who missed 7 games, came back from that calf injury, they win because he scores. It is a pretty simple formula, and he was great in this game. Wolves led by 10 with about 4.5 minutes left in the third quarter. He had 18 of his 36 from that point forward. Final 16.5 minutes was all Dame. The T-Wolves up 10 with 4.5 minutes left. Blazers close the third on a 16-6 run, take a lead into the fourth, and don't trail in the final quarter, and largely because of shot making, right? Portland's defense was really bad to begin this game. They could not handle the Minnesota pick and roll. Just like Rudy's going to dive, they're going to overhelp, they're going to spray out the shooters who are going to be open. If you spray out the shooters, you're going to be caught scrambling. You might be caught scrambling, give up a dunk, give up an open drive. Like, they were just picking apart, the T-Wolves were just picking apart Portland's defense and just ball screen stuff. They kind of cleaned it up, but they won this game because they score, because that's what they do.
Yeah, and for the Wolves, I mean, their pick and roll offense at times, it's been spotty. I mean, trying to figure out how to play with Rudy, that's how you play with him offensively. He's either setting a screen and rolling, or he's just kind of hanging out in the dunker spot. And right, those are the two things he does. You're not going to post him up. And so it was good to see the Wolves find some consistency, ironically, without Karl-Anthony Towns on the floor. But, there's being able to find some consistency with both Ant and D'Lo operating in pick and roll. Russell's played a lot better lately. And for Portland, I mean, like, defensively, you're right. The Wolves did kind of pick them apart. And like I said, that's not something we've seen the Wolves do to very many defenses this year. The Wolves only managed to get 4 offensive rebounds in this game. Second chance points was an area that Portland really dominated in this game. And Portland's a pretty average, I think a little below average team in terms of defensive rebounding.
Yeah, they're bad.
I mean, was it unusual to see, Nurkic had 15 boards in this game. Josh Hart had 8 rebounds in this game. The Wolves, especially, Rudy's still getting rebounds, but it's their perimeter guys, it's their wings that aren't rebounding the ball. What did you see differently from Portland in this game, or was it surprising to see them dominate a team so thoroughly on the glass? And what did you see there?
The big difference was Jeremy Grant getting rebounds. He is not a very good rebounder. He's in the 4-ish, just over 4 a game, but he gets like 4 a game, and he's like, he's not a big contested rebound guy. That's just not what he is. He's like many on this fine Pinwheels team, he scores. And he's got a little defensive length, but he's a scorer. That's what he's been. He doesn't rebound well. He got 7 rebounds. Nurk, he had 15, but I think he had like 12 in the first like 2.5 quarters. Like, he had 12 when he checked out in the third. Like, he was just all over the glass early. He was really good. Josh Hart's one of the best little guy rebounders in the NBA. That's what he does. Typically, when the Blazers get crushed on the glass, it's when Josh Hart has a 5 rebound, 4 rebound game. They need him to grab 8, 9, 10. Like, that's for whatever reason, that's how the roster is built, is such that Josh Hart, who is an elite rebounder for his size, has to be one of their best rebounders. That's just how how they have to win games. That's been crucial for them when they've lost that battle for second chance points. They've lost those games. They get 22 second chance points, a bunch of second opportunities. Typically, with the way the Blazers play, those second opportunities turn into threes. Like they burn you, they kick out and burn you on those chances. That's different for them. That to me, they made a handful more threes. They're a better 3-point shooting team. They, got to the free throw line more often. Damian Lillard is the type of person who gets more free throws than others, just kind of the way the league works. But the second chance points is probably the difference there in a game that really came down to the final 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I mean, Jeremy Grant, and going back to him, the Wolves have a similar issue with Jaden McDaniels, where he's been pressed into playing the 4 more frequently with no Karl-Anthony Towns. He's effectively playing the 4 most of the time now, when he traditionally, or the preferred lineup is him at the 3, and he doesn't rebound the ball well for his size, for his length, for his athleticism. So the Wolves kind of fall into that same issue. And as a team, it's the wings and guards that aren't holding up their end of the bargain. They could use a guard who's an elite rebounder for their size and position, like a Josh Hart. I mean, that's the sort of thing that they're really struggling with. You mentioned Lillard getting to the line 15 times. The Blazers only got to the line 4 more times than the Wolves, but shot the ball much better there. So they were +7 in the made free throws category. The Wolves at times have struggled to defend without fouling this year. They've actually gotten progressively worse as the year has gone on in terms of opponent free throw rate. Besides that, is there anything that you think, from your perspective, just watching the game from a, covering the Blazers perspective, that Portland needs to do differently offensively? They obviously scored 124 points, or that the Wolves could do to try and slow down the Blazers on that end of the floor. If you were Chris Finch, what do you do to try and avoid Lillard and Simons just going nuts down the stretch?
Some of it is playing to your weaknesses, so I don't know if he'll do that. But
yeah,
Anthony Simons is going to eat you alive in a soft drop. Like he is one of the best shooters in the league. Someone has to be at the level, and you have to just dare him to beat you. I don't think you want to straight switch and put Rudy Gobert, who they'll mostly attack in those situations, because they know he'll be in drop, not because he's like this super terrible defender, but because of the way he naturally defends. If he's in a soft drop, or if he's in even just like not all the way at the level, Ant is going to come around the screen, manipulate the screen, and shoot it. Like he's just going to shoot it. So either trying to get Rudy out of the dance. Sometimes the Blazers will move slow in offense, and they'll say, hey, come up here. They did it a bunch. Like Drew, calling Drew Eubanks up, just literally pounding the rock and picking their guy. Switch out of that. Don't let it be Rudy, because you can switch more freely with pretty much everyone else. I don't think they should let Rudy defend in space. I don't think you have your guys do what they're bad at. I don't think that's an adjustment in the NBA. But if you play soft drop against these guards, if you aren't at the level, this might just be how it goes. Like Anthony Simons might make 5 of 10 threes. That's a very normal night against that type of defense for him.
Yeah, and I think if this matchup was happening now, of course we're getting 2 of the, I guess, probably 4 games between these 2 teams right now, but later in the season, if Towns is on the floor, I think the Wolves do a lot more playing at the level like they did last year. I mean, last year they played almost exclusively high wall coverage in pick and roll, and then with Rudy, it's like you said, you want to play to his strengths. But against a team with dynamic guards that can beat drop coverage, whether that's from beyond the arc or mid-range jumpers or floaters or whatever that is, when the Wolves tried to play drop when they didn't have Rudy, going back a couple of years under Ryan Saunders, they got eaten alive by the Kyrie Irvings, by the D'Angelo Russells, by guards who could kill you from mid-range. And the Blazers have always been a tough matchup for the Wolves for that reason, because they struggle and drop. And even with the league's probably still the best drop big in the league, and with Rudy, that's still an area that they're really challenged to be consistent in. On the other side of the floor, I guess last question. I mean, the Wolves pretty much got what they wanted offensively, except, down the stretch, they had some sloppy possessions. Portland did just enough. And of course, like we talked about, secured rebounds and limited second chance opportunities for the Wolves. What does Portland have to do better defensively to keep the Wolves from scoring 118 plus points again on Monday?
Yeah, I will recommend our listeners to go to Bet Online and go ahead and smash the over on this one.
Yes.
Yeah. Unless it's crazy high, but if it's like 230, I'd say that's money in the bank. It's a lot of their issues guarding the pick and roll were just over helping. It's like Rudy dives to the rim, and they're worried about that dive, and they come in from the corner, and it's easy pass. You see it wide open in the corner, you make one pass, and then you're stuck in rotations. And if teams in rotations are worse, like every team in rotation is worse. So some of it is just contain the ball. I thought what they did down the stretch a little bit differently is that they switched those pick and rolls mostly when they had Yusuf Nurkic off the floor, much like Rudy Gobert, the Blazers don't really want Nurk to guard in space. They don't want him on D'Angelo Russell having to guard a mid-range pull-up. D'Lo's going to hit that. Like he's gonna hurt him, or at least it's going to be a pretty valuable shot. So some of it is go to those switching principles that they had, or some of it was like show and recover. They show the screen, then try to get back to Rudy without over helping. But I think the switching, and they did it late, just switch and let Rudy Gobert try to post up Anthony Simons. Dare him to post up every time down the court. Like I would. I'm not an NBA coach, so maybe he'll get burned, but I would just, particularly late in the game, I would straight switch it and say, throw it to the big guy and see what happens. You might get killed on the glass, but I'm saying fight over the top, make it a little bit hard, and just dare them to play one-on-one, or dare them to dump it in. They don't want to pass the ball to Rudy Gobert. I watched him play. They don't want to make that pass. The guards want to shoot it. You're going to win some of those, enough of those that you'll probably break even. And the Blazers are good enough on offense that, like, when they score 118, hold them to 111, you're going to win, baby. It's that simple.
Yes. And the Wolves have, without Towns, the offense is less complicated. They're just doing a lot more straight pick and rolls. There's less, it's obviously less dynamic, right? Because you don't have that 3-level scorer who's going to use most of your possessions. And so you should be able to force the Wolves into almost whatever you want to force them into. And as long as the pick and roll coverage is good enough when the Wolves get into it, then, and also like D'Lo's he's shooting the ball a lot better lately, but he's been pretty up and down. And so if you can cross your fingers for a poor D'Lo night too, he's probably due sooner or later. All right. Well, like we talked about, it'll be tough to win 2 consecutive. So we'll see how Monday shakes out. Thanks for joining. Of course, you can, thanks for joining the show, Mike. You can, of course, go listen to Locked On Blazers wherever you get podcasts, and go get prepped for Monday's game with his show on Monday. Thanks for coming on the show, Mike.
Appreciate you having me.
These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Simply add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. It's extremely easy. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's time to finish the year strong. The home stretch here, now mid-December, the right team member might just help you finish the year strong. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, a big thanks for Mike Richmond of Locked On Blazers for joining the show. As I mentioned here a minute ago, go check him out. His podcast out. Mike and I did a segment. I did a segment for his show, obviously talking about the Wolves-Blazers matchup from a little bit of a different perspective. We did cover some different topics, so go check that out. He does a fantastic job covering Portland. All right, I want to close the show here today talking a little bit about the upcoming week for the Wolves and what to expect. I think I said about a week ago, going into the last week of Wolves games, this was, I guess, on the heels of that Thunder loss last Saturday, which was so disappointing after the big Memphis win. I think I said, like, hey, they got to beat Indiana Wednesday. And then if you go 3-2 on the road trip, you come home, you're a game above 500. Well, we're on pace, right? The Wolves beat Indiana Wednesday, and then they split the back-to-back Friday, Saturday, which I expected. I didn't know which game they'd win, but winning in Utah, losing in Portland, that makes sense. Now you have at Portland Monday, at the Clippers Wednesday on ESPN, and then at the Thunder on Friday night. They've got to win 2 out of 3. And it's tough to beat a team twice in 3 days. So, like, the Wolves should win on Monday at Portland. I mean, say should win. It's a very winnable game, right? Because they have that kind of small built-in advantage. Hopefully they took Portland's best punch in terms of, Dame being perfect at the free throw line in 15 attempts, and those guys combining, him and Simons combining for 67 points. Like, on the other hand, the Wolves also scored 118. Can they do that again? Can the offense continue to operate as good as it did on Saturday? Now, of course, as Mike said, the Blazers really struggle in pick and roll coverage, and the Wolves are going to try and pick and roll the Blazers to death on Monday. If they're able to do that, it's just a matter of, like, hey, can the Wolves secure rebounds? Can they end possessions for Portland with defensive rebounds and not let Nurkic and others go to town on the offensive glass? And can they maybe get some second chance opportunities of their own? If that's the case, I think they beat Portland Monday. Wednesday against the Clippers is a pretty interesting game. I believe it's the first time we've seen the Clippers all season, if I'm not mistaken. And LA's been decidedly up and down so far this year. They're currently 15-13, so just a couple games above 500. They played a couple more games than the Wolves have. They beat the Wizards last time out, and they take on Boston Monday. Before that, though, they lost at Miami and at Orlando. They beat Charlotte before that, so they're like, 2-4 in their last 6 games. Before that, they'd won 5 out of 7, so a pretty streaky season for the Clippers. They're at this point relatively healthy compared to where they have been. So, I mean, like Kawhi's missed some time, of course, of late. So, it's a little early to really break down that injury matchup yet. We're a couple days out, but a tough game, no doubt, at the Clippers, but a winnable game to be sure. And then at Oklahoma City on Friday, the Wolves have already played the Thunder 3 times. This will be the 4th and final time that we see the Thunder this year. The Wolves are 2-1 against them, but of course they just lost to the Thunder a week ago Saturday. So it'll be just under 2 weeks since the last time these two teams played. Since then, the Thunder went on the road and beat Atlanta, and then they lost at the Grizzlies and at the Cavs. They play at Dallas Monday night. So they could very well, I mean, I guess they play one more time between now and then. So they could end up being on a bit of a losing streak coming into that Wolves game. But I mean, Oklahoma City sitting here at 11-15 through play on Sunday. That's better than anybody expected. They're certainly competitive. And to this point, I mean, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's only missed a couple of games. Like, they've been healthy. Kenrich Williams is now down. He always plays well against the Wolves. But I mean, like, SGA scored 35 against the Thunder the other day in their win over the Hawks. Like, he's, I said this before the last time they played the Thunder, like there's not going to be an MVP for a below 500 team, but he's been one of the best players in the league so far this season. Like, he won't be mentioned in the MVP conversation, but given the rest of that roster, I mean, he is the reason that this team is 11-15, right? And you got a couple of role guys that are good players, like a Williams, that could be doing stuff on other teams, but a lot of those guys aren't really like rotation caliber NBA players now. Some of them might be in the future. There is some serious young talent on that team, but this is all about SGA. And the Wolves really struggled to slow him down. They take him on again. That's Friday night. So of those 3 games, at Portland on Monday, at the Clippers Wednesday, and at the Thunder on Friday, the Wolves have to win 2 out of 3. Now, the easiest 2 should be Portland and Oklahoma City. None of these are back-to-backs, of course, so they should be able to win 2 out of 3. And if they're able to do that, they'll come home at 15-14 to take on the Chicago Bulls next Sunday. And then they have Sunday, Monday back-to-back, Bulls, Dallas. So a tough back-to-back, but not as tough as I think most people would have thought before the season. Those teams have been somewhat underwhelming. And then they've got the weird double home game against Dallas Monday, Wednesday next week. So that's another kind of 3-game set. You'd like to think you win 2 out of 3 against Chicago and 2 against Dallas. It's going to be tough to beat the Mavs twice, but maybe you beat the Bulls. Maybe you lose to the Mavs in the back-to-back, but beat them on Wednesday. So if we take this in 3-game chunks, the Wolves should win 2 out of their next 3, hopefully 2 out of 3 after that. And then a really tough road trip. Like, it really doesn't get tougher than this between Christmas and New Year's. At Boston, at Miami, at the Pelicans, at the Bucks. Like, that's got to be the toughest 4-game stretch of the season. I mean, there's almost no way around that. So the Wolves, to go into that stretch, if they can win 2 out of their next 3, win 2 out of their 3 after that, there'll be 2 games above 500 going into that 4-game stretch on the road. And we're going to be, and then there's in New Year's Eve, they play the Pistons. So going into the new year, the Wolves very well could still be below 500 because this is such a brutal stretch. And then we get into about the earliest time that Cat could potentially come back, which is that first week of January, based on that initial 4 to 5, I think it was 4 to 5 week timeline that the national reporters had mentioned. That wasn't a local, a locally mentioned thing. I don't think any of the local reporters, the team certainly hasn't given a timeline, but nationally people were saying like, hey, this could be 4 to 5, maybe 6 weeks. So then we start to get into that timeline once you're into January. So anyway, these next 6 games are super important because that murderer's row of a road schedule is going to be real serious for the Wolves. Of course, after the show tonight, Monday night, we'll do the live postcast with Marnie Gellner about 45 minutes after the game. So undoubtedly it'll be after midnight Central Time. So please, if you're feeling up for it, whether the Wolves win or not, join us for that postcast on Locked On Sports Minnesota on the YouTube channel. That's where we go live. We post the audio after the fact on Locked On Wolves, all the audio channels. So again, wherever you listen, you can find that. And then, of course, on Tuesday, we'll do the full post-game podcast. We'll break down Monday night's game. on Tuesday's show here at Locked On Wolves. A big thank you to those that do make Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. It's absolutely appreciated. Again, you can listen anywhere. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. And of course, also the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Of course, Locked On Wolves is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. The Locked On Podcast Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. And for your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.